Mark Pope, the new head basketball coach at BYU. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Bob, I'm happy to be here.
Now, you had a great thing going at UVU. I mean, you're in record-setting territory there. And then Dave Rose retired. When Tom Holmoe called you on the phone and had you come up University Parkway, was that a tough decision for you?
It was a tough decision for a lot of reasons. In terms of what was going on at the time. Every spring you enter into the coaching circus cycle, right? And so when I first received a call from actually Tom and Brian individually, I had just finished interviewing at another school that I'd kind of gone a ways down the path with, and so there was that dynamic. There was Utah Valley, there was one other school involved, and there was, of course, BYU, and so originally it was a little bit confusing because there were so many dynamics in place. When it came down to it, what ultimately made the decision so hard was one thing, and that was how much I love these boys at UVU. These young men had come there and kind of decided that they were going to try and accomplish something really special, and we had worked together, and we had an incredibly veteran team coming back. We spent a lot of time together. So ultimately, that became the one thing that made it a tough decision, but originally there was a lot of stuff going on.
When you are teaching a basketball team about unity and common purpose and working together as a team, and then the head of the team says, I'm out. What kind of an effect does that have on UVU or any other team where that happens?
Well, it can be two things. One, it can be really disorienting, okay, which certainly is the case. But then after you get over that initial push, I think it'd be incredibly unifying. And that's what athletes do, right? We talk to our players every single day about there's things that happen to you all the time. Ref gives you a bad whistle. The ball doesn't go in the hoop. Travel schedule to a game gets messed up. You get a bad, a bad seed in the tournament. All these things can happen to you. You make a mistake on the court, but the key to athletics is how do you respond? What is your response? You're always asked to check yourself and see how you respond. And I know the character of these guys at Utah Valley. I love those young men, and I know how they're going to respond. And the way they're going to respond is being disoriented at first, and then when they really check themselves, they'll respond, and it's going to be something that unifies them, and they'll do really special things.
Why did BYU hire you? What do you bring to the table that was missing?
I have no idea. I don't think anything was missing. I mean, the only thing that was missing was that Coach Rose decided that it was time for him to be done. He's one of the great coaches in the history of college basketball, and certainly his tenure at BYU was unprecedented in a lot of different ways. And so that was the one thing that was missing, was they just needed to go hire a new head coach. And I had a great experience there as an assistant. I think that it's one of the extraordinary institutions on the planet. I think it brings an incredible uniqueness and specialness to the table. And so, if I bring anything, I bring an appreciation for the university and what it stands for and the history of the athletic department and maybe a vision for what it can be.
Dave Rose built a great program there over his tenure, but there is the perception that it was starting to decline a little bit in the years just before he announced his retirement. Certainly coaching college basketball can be very difficult. I mean, it's a finicky and fickle environment, and I mean, for all of your best efforts, things may not go your way. What, in your view, is the key to running a stable, productive program regardless of the big or little challenges?
Well, it starts and ends with the players. It always does. In fact, whenever I'm asked a question that I don't know exactly the answer to, I just go to the players. Whenever we're in a situation where I'm not sure exactly how to guide us through it, you go back to the players, right? And so if you ask me what's going to determine the success of the program, it's going to be a couple things. It's that these young men come in as one person and they leave our program as somebody way different, right? This should be a growing process. That's what college is, and in college athletics should just be a growing college experience on steroids. It should be a chance for these young men to come in and grow and be challenged and be exposed to themselves and to the world and have to figure out who they are. They should leave this place with incredible confidence and belief in themselves and what they can do and an understanding of what a team can do together. So that's one. The other thing we have to do, we got to win. We got to win, and we got to win big. And you know, Brian Santiago jokes with me all the time that he's given me 3 months to win a national championship. So
only 3.
So I got 1 month left to get this job done. But the expectations there are high, and they've been set high by Frank Arnold and Liddell Anderson and Dave Rose and all the great coaches and all the great players that have been there. And so the expectation is that we come in and do great things, and that's what we're going to work to do.
How important is it for BYU to beat Gonzaga, for the Mormons to beat the Catholics?
Well, I think it's really important. You know, one of the phrases that rolls around our athletic department is that we were put on this earth to win. And that's fun, and there's something true about it too. There's some place that meshes into the mission of this university and the mission of the faith that supports it. And there's some little slice of that. I don't want to get in too much trouble, but it's important. You know, we have a program so we can be excellent. Our guys come to BYU so that they can be the best, and we have this incredible gift of having the #1 ranked team in the country in our conference, right? And so it's really important. It's important that we beat Pacific. It's important that we beat all the teams up and down our league, and it's certainly important that we compete with St. Mary's and Gonzaga, and that we win games. And listen, we need to go win a conference regular season championship, and we need to go win a conference postseason tournament. And we need to make it in the NCAA tournament and win games, and that's our job. That's what we've been asked to do, and that's what my guys are aspiring to do. That's what they want to do. That's what they're passionate about. And so all those things come together, and it's the expectation.
But it seems like Gonzaga stands in the breach. They stand right in the way of BYU really rising to the top of the conference.
Well, I think that's true, and certainly that's the way the entire conference feels. Is these Zags, man, they win the conference every single year. And so it's something that we're working towards, and it's nice to have that incredible program to chase.
How much of a role did you play in Yoli Childs deciding to come back to BYU after testing the waters in the NBA?
I think that I talked him into submission. That
Really?
was probably my role. At the end, he just tapped out and said, "Enough, just stop talking to me," right? I'll do it.
What turned him?
I think it was himself. You know, I talk about this all the time. This game, okay, I love this game so much, and I love this college experience for these guys playing this game, because it just gives you this crucible, right, where it picks you to pieces and it turns you upside down and all around. And you have to survive, you have to find out who you are and what you care about. It's the only way to make it through this gauntlet. And this decision being really public for Yoli, and everybody having an opinion, and everybody caring, from his teammates to BYU fans that he's never met before, they all care so deeply. And all that pressure combined to help him take some time to figure out what he really most cares about. And he said it the best in a lot of ways. He said, one of the things he said in his press conference, he said, "Listen, I'm going to have 15 years to be a pro. I only get 1 year to go see what I can accomplish at BYU." And he talked about these teammates that he gets to take a chance with. And he talked about how much he loves this university and how much he appreciates these fans. And the fact that he probably gets to impact a lot of lives in this unique way for only 1 more year. And I think all those things came together, and he said, "I want to come take a swing at this." So I don't think I had much to do with it. I think it was Yoli having a chance to really explore what he cared about and what he thought, and deciding that he loved this university and these teammates and wanted to come back and try it again.
Nick Emery has had a difficult past few years, but now he's back. He's in good standing with the university, good standing with the team. And he's poised to make a great comeback. What are the challenges that he faces in returning to Division I basketball star status?
Yeah. I think he carries the challenges of baggage, right? And so do all of us. I mean, if Nick Emery is not the story of all of us, then who is, right? We've all stumbled. We've all gone sideways. We've all had tough things happen to us. Those people that haven't, they probably should be at a different place than BYU, because we're all trying to figure it out and do the best we can. And so in that sense, it's hard not to cheer for Nick, because he's tried to make restitution for everything that's gone wrong, and he's tried to overcome difficulties that he's faced, and this is his last shot to see if he can, how well he can make things right. I mean, I love redemption stories. It's what sports is, right? And so I'm cheering for him. He's working hard. He's got a renewed focus right now, and the trick for him is how long can he hold on to that focus, and how much of himself can he dedicate to this process, and how much of a new Nick Emery can he find, and that process is exhilarating, and it's something that we should be celebrating and excited about.
I've heard you say that in order to achieve excellence, you have to break things. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that failure is hard to deal with, but it's a very clear teacher. It's very direct. Like, you can't miss it. When you fail, clearly things aren't working right, and you got to find a new way to approach it, right? And when you have success, I think that can be really challenging, because I think success can also be a seductress in the sense of like, hey, it worked before, so stay with it and kind of stay the same course. But I think in this constant grind of chasing being better all the time, when you have success, you still need to take it and turn it upside down and look all around and see if there's a way you can do it better, a way that you can do it new, and making the decision between the core values that kind of helped you be successful, and then adding some new flavor to it that can actually make you better, right? So I think when I talk about breaking things, I'm really thinking about complacency. And I think it's something that every athlete faces. Most of us face it at some time.
You played for the Kentucky Wildcats. You went on to play for the Indiana Pacers, the Denver Nuggets, the Milwaukee Bucks. You played under Nick Pitino. Tell me about the psychological evolution of going from player to assistant coach to head coach. How do you navigate those waters?
It's a lot different. It's a completely different career path, as weird as that sounds, as odd as that sounds. As a player, you have certain responsibilities that are about the team and about striving to grow your own game. As a coach, especially in college, it's a really diverse array of responsibilities that you have. So that growth process for me was, as a player, I was like, I'm never going to become a coach. Why would I ever coach? Mm. And then as I came towards the end of my career, it was something I started to consider more. And then I kind of got out of basketball for a little while and just missed it, and was able to step away. And when you step away, you kind of can have a new perspective on what it looks like. And then jump back in with a great coach, Mark Fox of Georgia, who gave me the incredible responsibility of folding the laundry and handing out water, and really learned the business kind of from the ground up in a really humbling way, but a great way, and a painstaking way. And then was fortunate to kind of become an assistant pretty quick, and then was an assistant for a while, and then becoming a head coach. The thing that I talk about all the time was going from an assistant where you just do 24/7. Your job is to do. You have sleepless nights and sleepless days, and you're constantly doing. And then becoming a head coach, the one thing that I talk about all the time that's been different for me is I'm just so eager to find time to just think, right? Mm-hmm. To kind of ponder and kind of gain perspective and kind of evaluate and find ways to kind of guide the different parts of the program. And so that's a little bit in the evolution.
You talk about the intensity of being an assistant coach, but the responsibility of being a head coach, everything comes back to you. And whether the players are giving you what the players can give you, it still comes back to you. How important is it for leadership those who hold leadership positions, whether in basketball or anything else, to number one, get enough sleep, number two, get enough downtime so that you can think.
Yeah.
How important is that?
I think it's important. One of the things that became clear to me when I took my first head coaching job was that as an assistant, players were counting on me for instruction, and the head coach was counting on me to do my job really well. As a head coach, I feel like there's a lot of people in our little tiny slice of what we do. There's a lot of different people that are counting on me for direction, right? And so I think that's where the need for thinking comes in, right? The need for pondering, the need for considering and evaluating. This idea of kind of being able to kind of paint a vision for where we're going to go, not just today in this minute, but kind of also always thinking a little bit ahead of where we need to go as a program. And I actually love that part of this deal. I've really fallen in love with it because now I have this great excuse to spend most of my days just sitting by the pool.
I'm sure you're not doing a lot of that. What surprises you most about your new job as head basketball coach at BYU?
I don't know if it surprises me the most, but one of the things that I love the most about the job is people care. They care. Like BYU means a lot. I was at the introductory press conference, and somebody that I've known for a long time came up to me after the press conference and said, and I was a little surprised to hear this from him, but he said, "This matters." And he told me a story about growing up, and he grew up, in a different place, and he's a faithful member of the church, and as a young person, he was in a lot of situations that were uncomfortable. He didn't have a lot of friends that kind of shared his standards, and that could make him uncomfortable at times. And then 1984 came, and all of a sudden it made things a little bit easier to digest, and his friends maybe were a little more interested in kind of him and what he thought and why he did the things he did and made the life choices he made. And so you have stories like that to just people that have grown up around the program their whole life and they care. And I love that because it makes it fun. It brings a lot of responsibility, and it means that every day, at any moment, you could be fired because you don't do your job well.
In terms of trying to cultivate a culture of excellence, how do you compensate for a bad situation that you find yourself in? And let me use this example. You started out at University of Washington with the Huskies and then transferred to Kentucky, two diametrically different programs. And once you got to Kentucky, your eyes were really kind of open. What about those folks who are trying to achieve personal excellence but find themselves in a situation like you did at Washington where the conditions aren't ideal for that kind of thing?
So I think adversity is a gift. I do. I think it's a gift. And I was at the University of Washington, and I was playing for a coach that I loved, who was an ornery, tough taskmaster, a former FBI agent on the narc squad, if you can believe that.
Wow.
And I went there thinking we were going to be able to kind of turn this thing, and we couldn't do it. And as one of the lead dogs on the team, I couldn't do it. I just failed. And knowing going into my sophomore season that if we didn't get this right, Coach was getting fired. And certainly enough, we couldn't get it right, and Coach got fired. And it was an epic failure. It was incredibly painful, a lot of tears, a lot of turmoil, and that's where I come to say I think adversity is a gift. Because it can refocus you and it can fuel you, and you can learn if you'll pay attention. There's so much that you can learn. I told a story recently about when I was playing for the Indiana Pacers. I'm playing for Larry Bird. He's my hero. My whole life. I watched him. I went to games and saw him perform and saw the incredible things he did on the floor, and his confidence and his swagger and everything about him. And then I got to play for him. And one of the most painful days in my entire life was when he called me in the office and he fired me. And he said, "You know what, you're not good enough for us anymore. Maybe you never were." I mean, this is not what he said, but that's what you say when you're firing somebody. And But again, that was a rebirth for my career, right? And that adverse moment was so, I was so embarrassed and ashamed, and it was so painful, but then it gives you a platform from which you can learn and grow, and then great things happened after that because of that adversity. And so now I look at it as one of the choice experiences in my life, even though it was that terrible and painful. I do believe this. I think adversity is a gift when we can understand it.
You transferred from the University of Washington to the University of Kentucky to play under Coach Rick Pitino. Tell me about that transfer. How difficult was it for you?
It was hard, because Coach P is hard. They talk about creating adversity every moment of every day. He demanded so much of us. Genuinely, I think for my whole athletic career, except for when I was young, for my whole athletic career leading up to my time in Kentucky, I felt like I was my hardest taskmaster on myself, my hardest critic, and I feel really comfortable saying that. That was my whole career. When I met Coach, I was like, oh, this dude is way more serious than I am. And so he was hard on us.
He was your toughest critic.
Oh my gosh, he took us to a whole new place. In fact, I don't know if this will fit on this deal, but so we're taking a trip to Italy. And so we've been working the last couple of days on ironing out the itinerary of the trip. And I'm so excited about the trip, but there's so many things that I'm trying to avoid, and everyone around me is like, why are you not doing that? Why are you not doing this? And I finally realized, I'm like, I have PTSD. There's no doubt about it, because before my senior year, Coach P took us on a foreign tour to Italy. And we practiced so hard, and we played so hard, and all I can remember vaguely is I think we drove the bus around the Coliseum one time, and I remember one afternoon after our morning practice, before our evening practice, we stopped in Verona, and we had to walk to the little statue of Juliet, and the whole time I was like, I was either going to pass out or I was going to vomit because it was so fatigued. And he was tough like that. But what he did was he took every single one of us to a new place that I never could have got to myself. And that's one of the great things about athletics. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to do that to my team. We'll see.
You've talked about in the past how many of the players on the Kentucky team wound up thinking they hated Coach B.
Yep.
Why?
Well, we didn't wind up thinking it. It was every day. Every day after this torrent, whether it was the first practice day or the second practice day, we'd walk in the locker room and just feel like, that guy, man, I just can't stand him, because he was driving us so hard. But I'll tell you what's interesting, and I think it's something that maybe this generation misses out on a little bit. So you take that team that went on and won a national championship, and you had 9 guys from that team go play in the NBA. 8 of them play 7 years or more in the NBA, and now over half of them are coaching. It's really interesting. But I think sometimes now we have this tendency to want to save our children or save ourselves from these really, really hard, demanding experiences. But then if we'll stay in there and we'll fight through it and we'll battle and we'll suffer and sacrifice, then when you come out the other end, it changes you. And that's why all of us went on to have successful careers professionally, and why so many of us are coaching. I think because in hindsight, we're like, it changed me. It changed me forever.
You played for the legendary Rick Pitino at the University of Kentucky. What did he teach you about being a player, and what did he teach you about being a coach?
I think if I was going to say one thing about Coach, about being a player, he taught me about urgency, the urgency of the moment. So I had a great experience. So Coach Pitino was my coach at Kentucky. We would come to a timeout, and as we were walking off the floor, he would start barking at us, yelling at us, a lot of phlegm flying at our face, right, grabbing our jersey. And for the entire time, it would be instruction after instruction after instruction after instruction, touching on every single point, right? So much so that your head is spinning and you're terrified the whole time, because at any moment you don't know what he's going to do. And then right after him, I moved to Larry Bird with the Indiana Pacers. And my first time out with Coach Bird, I'll never forget. came to the timeout, and we just sat there. And Coach sat down in front of us, and he kind of looked at us and then looked around the arena, grabbed some water, drank a little bit of water. Timeout's almost off, the first horn sounds, and then he told us one thing. He said, listen, this is what we got to look at right now. And we walked out, and sure enough, he was right. And I thought about that a lot in hindsight. And I'm like, man, at first I thought Coach Bird was so much more insightful than Coach Pitino, because he could just distill the game, the moment of the game, down to one thing, and he was right so often. And Coach P was just like yelling out things crazy all the time. But I think what I've learned now is that Coach P was just saying one thing too. With all these instructions frantically, he was just saying, this is urgent right now. I need everything you have, right? Urgent, urgent, urgent. That's the one thing he was saying. And so I think that's the one thing he taught me as a player. And then I think the one thing he taught me as a coach is, along the same lines, is just this idea of being relentless, right? Is this idea of like, you got to come every day, you got to bring it every day, you got to take every setback and every victory, and then you just got to forge on as hard as you can. There's no time to waste, there's no energy to spare, we just got to go, right? And that's how he was. He's this relentless force of nature that just never stopped. And I count him as a great friend now. I'm still terrified of him, but he taught us a lot of things.
Whether it's in basketball or in life or any endeavor, whether it's business or academics or whatever you're engaged in, what does relentless mean in your mind?
So I think relentless, for me, it means, I think I use relentless because I live in terror all the time. I live in fear of failure all the time. And to me, relentless just disposes of failure. Relentless means that it doesn't matter if I have adversity in front of me or success in front of me, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. I'm not stopping. And I'm going to keep hitting it hard. And I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm not going to wallow in self-pity. I'm not going to spend too much time celebrating victory. Like, we are going to keep moving every day in pursuit of our ultimate goal. And I think that's what relentless is. I think relentless is a refusal to be distracted by anything that's happening around you, away from your energy going into what you're chasing. And I think it's something that I encourage my players on, right? Is this idea of don't be distracted by the moment, whatever it is. You know where you're going. I think I talk to my staff about that all the time. I think it's an important principle for how we have chosen to coach.
Now that you are the head recruiter at BYU Basketball, you have some unique challenges. You have to find outstanding basketball players, and you have to find outstanding athletes who fit into the BYU mold off the court.
Yeah.
How tough is that? And have you ever had an athlete sit down and say, this is just too tough, I can't make it?
No doubt, already. And that's part of the fit process, right? It's really important. There's a community that is clearly has a large percentage of fit with BYU. But I think that community is way bigger than we might think. And I kind of, in my mind, at least for now, until I get smarter, I can break it down to three things, right? Is if I have a young man, doesn't matter where he's come from, what his background is, socioeconomic status or religious affiliation or ideology, right? But if he has an idea of faith, some concept of faith, some appreciation of faith, then he's going to have a chance to fit in at BYU. If he's got some idea in his life of living to a standard, not just kind of following every whim, but there's a standard in some way that he's going to live up to, he's going to be a good fit for BYU. And if he's got some idea of sacrifice, if he's got some idea, some concept in his life where he can say, hey, there's something actually more important than me, where I will put the requirements or the responsibility of something bigger than me ahead of my own desires. If you fit those three things, I think you're going to find a really happy home at BYU. I really do. I believe that. You know what's great about that? You know what athletics is? Successful athletes, they got to have faith. In athletics, you have to have faith that your work is going to result in success, right? You have to have that faith. And you have to have an idea of living up to a standard if you're a big-time athlete. And you have to know sacrifice. You sacrifice for your team. You sacrifice the daily relaxation that you could have to go work hard. So I think there's a commonality between the mission of BYU and the standard of BYU and what we strive for in athletics. I think they go hand in hand. I don't think it should be seen as something that is negative. I don't think it should be a limiting factor. I think it should be a really positive filter for what we're searching for in great athletes. And so that's how we're approaching this. And I think in that sense, this idea, this philosophy, this standard that we're trying to work towards at BYU, I think it has a lot of commonality with what every athlete's trying to do.
Finally, look into your crystal ball. Where do you see the BYU basketball program in 10 years?
Well, I hope, I think I have the same hope that every coach hopes, right? I hope we can get to a place where people around the country look at us and they say, okay, how are they doing that? I'll never forget, I was coaching at Wake Forest, and Coach Rose is making unbelievable runs. He's got great teams, and you looked at the personnel on the team and you were like, it's not a traditional team. And so I remember sitting there watching, like, how is he doing that? As a coach, a young coach, I was looking to be like, how is he getting this done? Like, what is the magic sauce he's got going on over there? And that's what I'd like us to be. I'd like us to be a team where all the other teams around the country and basketball players at all different levels and people outside of sports look at us and say, okay, this is really extraordinary what these guys are doing, and I know they approach it a little bit different. How are they getting it done? If we can get there in 10 years, then I'll probably retire and move somewhere sunny.
Mark Pope, new head basketball coach at BYU. Thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Thanks, Bob.